All right, okay, part 2 of our layer 2 demo. We're going to start putting in some of the ground plane. No matter how enticing it is for you to start painting the object itself, just wait for it. Have a little bit of restraint. It is incredibly hard. Restraint is not my strong suit. So right now I'm just washing my brush really well in the solvent, my paint thinner. I'm wiping the excess paint thinner off. I'm still using the same brush that I was using before. I'm going to try to get a value that I think will match the back part of that ground plane. Okay, now I see a whole lot of information back there. It's kind of dusty, there's some specks of stuff. I'm ignoring all of that. What I really just want to do is make sure I've got my value correct. I'm going to do the things that this second layer is meant for. Refining shape, refining value. It goes down a little bit. I'm using the painting process as a way to slow my eye down so that I can see better and more specifically. I might have this a little bit high, that's okay. So that little bit of dust on the ground plane here is causing some of it to appear a little bit lighter. Now this is very interesting to me. Like we know that this ground plane is like black colored. It's a piece of black foam board. But we are not painting the color that is printed on the foam board. We are painting the effect of light on that flat plane. And because of the position of that flat plane, the color that we perceive is not black at all. It's more towards middle tone. It's a little bit lighter towards the back. Comparatively, it's still not very light. To give you some reference, this is white, right? So this is nowhere near, in the back, it's nowhere near white. It's still pretty dark. Okay, it's just lighter than what we would think. So I'm going to, let's see, it gets a little bit darker as that ground plane comes closer. So I washed my brush with the solvent. I wiped off the excess. I'm going to get just a notch darker. That's too dark. So I put that mark down just now, and when I put it down, it actually looks like it's very close to the dark that I put up here. I don't want it to be that dark, okay, because I don't want this part of the ground plane to start looking like a different object or a different plane than this lighter color behind it. So let me try this. I'm gonna make a new value that's somewhere between this color and that color. Okay, let's see. That's too light. Let's adjust. That's better. Okay. Now remember, I talked a little bit, I showed you this wet into wet technique for getting a softer edge, and I can use that here. Since this area here is still wet and this area here is still wet, what I can do is just overlap my brush over that edge, and I get a slightly softer edge. Don't try to like blendy it. Don't try to, fuss with it. Just adjust that edge slightly. Okay. Blending and making adjustments in the transitions between tones is not on our list of major concerns for our second layer. All we are trying to do is add a layer of paint, our first kind of real layer of paint. We're trying to refine our shapes as we do it, push the darks, and get a step closer to details. Okay, so that is that. Okay, and it stays about like that. Slow brush stroke because the paint is thicker now, right? It's not thinned out. So I'm really having to like make sure it goes down into the canvas. Okay, now here. We're always going background to foreground. It gets a little bit darker. Let's see. I think I have this shadow way too long like this. Good, good, good. I'm glad that's the case. I do not like the way it's hugging that edge. I'll address that in just a moment. I need to get a little bit darker. Okay. Getting that, yep. So I'm giving y'all a lot to think about in this very first painting. And that's part of the reason that we really we're simplifying some of our variables. So we're simplifying like our object, our composition, all that stuff. You're just choosing one object. Here we go. So I noticed that this cast shadow, I had painted it way too long. And so what I'm going to do now is actually, there we go. I'm painting the negative shape around it. To trim it down. That's much better. And it's a much better rhythm too, compositionally. Okay. So slow it down. I constantly have to tell myself to slow down when I'm painting. I want to go fast. I'm kind of impulsive as a painter. I get excited about, some parts of the process and not excited about other parts of the process. So I really have to be mindful of those impulses as I'm making a representational piece. I have to rein myself in. Okay, so it looks like, to me up here, this is a little bit closer to that light source, the closer we get on the ground plane. And so here it gets a little bit lighter than darker. So as I get closer, I'm going to start looking for opportunities to bring a little bit of lightness in. I might even exaggerate some of this lightness here. I mean, not get it too light, but push it a little bit lighter than I see, because I think if I can set this part of the composition is make it a little bit different, get a little variation in there, then it might activate that part of the composition a little bit more. And that will solve that compositional issue that I identified a little bit earlier. This is something important. You are always in the driver's seat with your painting. Like even when our goal is to make a very representational painting, ooh, that's way too light. Not that light, Snipes. Even when our goal is to make a representational painting, that doesn't mean that you are beholden to the subject. I mean, there's some things you got to get right, and you can, use your skills in observation and perception to mimic or simulate, like proportion and underlying structure, perspective, light logic. But when it comes to composition, if there's something that you can do in your painting that will make your painting better, make your composition better, make your sense of space or depth better, and it doesn't compromise structural soundness, and it doesn't compromise perspective or atmospheric perspective or light logic, then by all means do it, right? So like enhancing the lightness up here, it doesn't do anything that's bad for any of the objects. If anything, it helps kind of make more dramatic where the light source is. It creates a little bit of rhythm. Let's see. I'm going to let it kind of go up a little bit like this, like that shape of light, just a little bit. Even though this area will have a softer edge, that implied edge will create a nice rhythm with some of these other diagonals that I see. Okay? So you can do a lot. I mean, a lot with just basic value shapes and patience. All right, so now I'm going to work on this object and this box that it's sitting on. I'm going to start by using the same brush I've been using to get it nice and clean and make sure it still has a good shape. You know, I want to make sure it's like this. Yeah. If it's, you know, like this and it's kind of frayed a little bit, like that's going to make it difficult when I'm working on this object. But just take care to shape it as you soak off the turpentine. Let's see. So that top. Okay. I'm just taking a minute just to think. I actually do think, because of the shape of the information up there, at least on the top of that object, I'm going to use a slightly smaller brush. I'm not getting detailed information or anything yet. I'm still thinking about basic form. It's just that the basic form of this part of the object, it's the tiniest, thinnest little cylinder, you know, and up here too. When I get back down here, I'll probably switch back to this brush, okay? And that'll help me make sure that I don't, you know, get farther along in one section than another. All right. So I am going to use a kind of a, not a tiny, but a slightly smaller round brush. Again, I am not, I repeat, not getting details, and I am not drawing anything by any means. I'm still refining shape. That is still the job of the second layer. Okay, and refining form. There we go. Now, the shadows, getting a little bit darker. I'm going to lay in, as I'm pushing the darks, the shadows on either side of this little flute or a trumpet shape. So I'm looking to the shadow shapes. They just happen to be long and skinny. Still feels a little bit like a block-in. If you can, you could probably zoom in on the video if you're having trouble seeing what I'm doing. I'm going to be giving y'all a little survey soon, just to get your feedback on how these videos are. You know, things like the pace of my speech and the volume of my speech, the light, you know, how close or far away we are from the, you were able to see the painting at least. And I can make adjustments, of course. So then here, where that light is hitting a little bit of that object, okay, simple as that. I actually I don't think I need to add anything to the middle or light area of this small cylinder. I think that what I got down in that first layer actually works well. So I'm going to move my way down, remembering to focus just on what I am seeing, okay? So don't go left brain on me for any of this. Okay, so So it's interesting that little bit of dust on the oil can. I'm trying not to think of it as being dust. I'm just trying to look and see the values that are there. So that dust, oh, that might be a little bit light. It's too light. It's definitely not white, what I just put on, but it's still like pretty stark. So I'm going to block in this shape. But that dust is reflecting a lot of light, and it's coming out as much lighter. Okay, there's that. Then the band that goes around that goes down. Clean off my brush. Gets a little bit darker. Now again, ooh, that's not dark enough. Let's see if this is dark enough. Yeah. I see a lot of information. I see like even tiny little reflections on this part of the oil can, but I'm totally ignoring those details right now. Those can be added in a little bit later. What I mostly just want to get is those slightly more precise shapes of the planes and a better sense of the values that are there. So I had a bunch of blobs before, and now I'm trying to clarify some of those blobs into like shapes that are planes. Okay, this next part of the cylinder is not as light as the top plane, not as dark as the top of the side plane. Let's see. So I'm going to slow my brush down just a little bit to get enough paint. A common question that I get in painting one is, I think I'm making this too big, too fat, y'all. I think I'm doing that thing, painting it bigger than it is. What do y'all think? Yep, a little bit. But a common question that I get in painting one is, you know, my hands always shake. What can I do about that? If my hands shake, how will I be able to paint something accurately? And my hands shake all the time, right? So something I do is I'll sometimes put my pinky on the canvas. There's also something called a maul stick, spelled like this, M-A-H-L, stick, which is a stick that you can basically put it on your painting like this on the top part, or even on your easel, and you can rest your hand on it for stability as you work, move up and down. The other option, the more obvious thing to do, is actually just embrace the shake, especially at this stage, because it doesn't need to be perfect. Now, since I made this part a little bit too thick, too wide, I'm going to go back to my negative shape around it, and I'm going to trim it down a little bit. Just like reel it back in. There we go. Now, if the paint that I'm putting on right now, if that mixes with the paint that's underneath it and it starts to make a new gray, you can just scrape off the wet paint that you're wanting to replace. There we go. That's a little bit better. A little bit more accurate. Okay. There we go. A little bit better. Not perfect, but a little bit better. Luckily, perfection is not our goal. Okay, so let me get the top. So and we'll show y'all real quick what I'm actually doing down here. Let's see if I can get a good image of that. Yeah, ish. There. What I actually end up doing is kind of mixing a little bit of some from one pile of the gray into the adjacent pile to get more subtle variations. And I'm doing that with my brush. As long as you make sure that your brush, you're cleaning your brush between colors, then this is perfectly fine. Okay. Let me get in, because This is pretty light as well. I'm just refining this shade. Still think I'm drawing this part a little bit big, but I think it'll be okay. It will be good enough, at least for the sake of project 1 and this demo. So I'm not painting everything on this top plane light because there are some cast shadows, you know, that fall on this. I'm only painting this light where I see this light. I'm not just painting the top plane solid and then painting the shadows on top of that. This is oil paint. If I did that, I'd end up with a wet, soppy, muddy mess. So you put your values only where you want your values. Here, it goes up here, and just for a moment back here as it goes right behind that. There's a little bit here as it goes around this little guy. So the questions that I'm asking myself are, do I have a sense of the form, like the geometric form that is this spout, and this top plane? Am I matching the values? Am I achieving a value that will help communicate space? Okay, let me add in a couple things. This video is a little bit longer than I thought it would be. Time flies when you're having fun. Totally, utterly true. Here we go. So I know it's probably a little bit of a challenge for y'all to, you know, sit and just watch this for, I don't know, 20 minutes on end. But it's good exercise, right? And patience in painting. That's kind of a cool thing about doing these demos and videos versus in the classrooms, that if y'all can watch these, or when you watch these ahead of time, you'll be able to, you know, watch them in segments and really process what I'm doing. Watch them over again. And we don't have to use our face-to-face time with y'all just, you know, watching me do this, you know, from a distance. It'd be a greater distance if y'all were having to watch me do this in class. This is all very important information. What you could even do, what I would suggest, is watch these first. I think I got that too light. Watch these first before you start making your painting, and make sure you kind of understand where I'm coming from with all this stuff. Okay. Then set up to make your painting. And then with each stage, background, middle ground, foreground, with each stage, revisit the video. If you're struggling with an aspect of this painting, even if it's not something that I literally say something about in this video, you know, stop, pause, take a break, watch the video again. Okay? Because in watching what I'm doing, not just listening to what I'm saying, but watching what I'm doing is probably going to help you problem solve. Okay, so I'm going to pause this video, and then we'll start with part 3 of layer 2.